Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
It says I need to ask the host for permission for me to record you.
Okay, I'm not getting a question.
It's okay, as long as you're recording, you can share
Well,
it.
the light's on, and we are, so the light's on, which means we are recording.
Allow
Okay.
record. So you can now. I have to, well, no, say yes to everybody.
Yeah, now it's working. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Jamie and Frank, I'm just allowing, again, you know, kind of giving you guys permission to record locally. I see Frank's doing that. That's great. All right. So I'll share a screen now, Craig. And we can do that. Cool. So you guys cool with me letting people in? We're bang on 2.
Yep.
One last question. How are we going to get people's our breakout session room? Or is it somewhere where they can click on it, or is it going to have in the chat box? What is your plan there?
I think Craig was
I was
planning to
gonna
put it in the
copy
chat. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I've got Eon Reality's link that you sent me, Frank, way back on whatever, the 4th.
Yeah.
Ready to cut and paste in there if that works for you.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good. Cool.
All right. So I'll let everybody in. Oh, I think I will. What are we doing here?
We'll turn off video.
Welcome, folks, as you come into the room. It's Craig McAtee with NCATC. We've got our panel lined up, and we're just going to wait about another 6 seconds before we kick this off so we can get all the people that are lined up to get in to the webinar situated. So hold tight. Good afternoon, everyone that's trickling into the webinar room now. We appreciate you being patient to get in and also registering to be part of this webinar. Probably our last this year from NCATC as our strategic partners. And actually, ironically, one of our newest strategic partners, AVR Connect, who bring along with them a vast group of great expertise in augmented reality, virtual reality, and extended reality folks. And today we have not only AVR Connect presenting, but we also have Eon Reality and another great group with the Glimpse group. And you'll hear about them from Adept XR Learning. But I want to go ahead to the next slide and let's get this thing rolling for everyone. We are recording this for everybody's knowledge, so we will have it up on our website and other places in the future. For all of you who can't make it or want to review it again, so that'll be there. And as we go through the webinar, please type any questions you might have for the panel in the chat box, and we will have a moderated part of that coming up at the end of the third presentation today by Eon. That's about it for now. And I just want to give a quick overview of NCTC for a lot of those people that might not be familiar. But our 4 focus areas are the future of work and Industry 4.0. That's our real big focus for the last 5 or 6 years and continues to grow. AR, VR obviously is a huge part of that under that umbrella. Work-based learning and apprenticeships all the way to internships and entrepreneurship is a huge piece of what our focus is on as well, coupled with competency-based education and learning and applied skills and knowledge with industry-recognized credentials. And all of that can be found more detailed on our website. Last but certainly not least, the underlying underrepresented populations, diversity, inclusion, and equity are very important to us across the scope of what we do. And those you'll hear a lot more about webinars in the new year, first quarter, about those things we are doing much more, raising the level of people in poverty, second chance citizens, as well as military returning to civilian life. On to the next slide. Just a quick overview of some of our network. We've got over 165 community and technical colleges as members in our network in 41 states. But the best thing, coupled with those great ATC workforce divisions of colleges, is our 40 strategic partners. Again, AVR Connect is our newest one. And if we flip the next slide, you can see a quick logo map of all of those great partners. Some of them are on with us today. I think Miller Electric's on with us, the welding experts, AMT, the Association for Manufacturing Technologies, on with us. And you can just go on and on. There's a whole lot of great corporate partners that help our colleges do a better job of experiential learning, online learning, and certifications. The next slide shows that we are coupled with 8 of the 14 Manufacturing USA institutes. And for those of you who aren't aware of them, hopefully most of you are, they were stood up over the last 8 years by the Department of Defense, Commerce, and Energy. We work with the 8 that are stood up and funded by the Department of Defense. The first one being in Youngstown, Ohio, at the top of the map, America Makes, for 3D additive, and we're working very closely with them on 3D additive technician training, as well as certification and apprenticeships. And you go on to ARM, the robotics folks, NextFlex on the West Coast, Nimble, et cetera, composites folks down in Tennessee. We're working with all those organizations, including DMDII, which is now branded MXD, and that's the closest to what we're doing in Industry 4.0 in a big scope of automation for manufacturing. Next slide. I just want to quickly welcome our 3 expert panelists and turn it over to Jim Lawrence, the president of AVR Connect. And then he'll turn it over to Hugh and Jamie as we move forward. But I'm telling you, we are blessed to have these experts from industry, and they'll be sharing with you how they're connecting with education, workforce, and industry needs as we move forward. Please don't forget to put your questions in the chat box, and I'll hand it over to Jim Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. And I'm going to pull up PowerPoint here very quickly. I promise just a couple slides here today. Craig, I thank you very much. I'm excited to be a new member and strategic partner, and especially looking forward to the opportunity to meet with other members and learn what's top of mind on their plate, and especially share what we're doing with augmented and virtual reality in the world of enhancing training and learning. So the goals of with NCATC and AVR Connect are very similar in the fact that we're supporting. Oh, I'm getting a feedback from someone out there, but we're supporting a lot of the same areas: schools, education, training, workforce development, as well as we have, and we'll talk briefly about this today, similar mission of supporting advanced technology centers. Briefly, as far as ARV Connect goes, our roots run deep into learning and technology and where those combine. Our background is in developing custom content and remote e-learning courses. And we're always looking for that best combination of software and content for the learner and the company at those particular times of what they're looking to push out there. So throughout the course of my life in learning and technology, this eventually led to AR and VR and immersive learning. And we pretty quickly had interest coming in from many different use cases, which revolved around education and events, and as well as remote field service.
Full screen.
And I will
No.
turn the slide here for a second. We pretty quickly had come to the understanding that interest was coming from many different use cases, which revolved around, of course, education and events. But from there, we started to learn a couple other things. One, in that there was a lot of options popping up from firms that had technical know-how to build AR or VR content, but not necessarily the learning, instructional design elements that came with it. And the ability to, as well as to track and manage results. And the second thing we kind of found out as we were going deeper and deeper into this combination of learning, technology, and AR, VR was there was the vendors that were going to be a long-term partner for you versus doing a project was hard to identify. You know, who was really going to stand up there at the end of the day? There's, I don't want to call them fly by night, but there's a lot of people just jumping into this industry right now saying we could do something for you. But what was really that goal at the end of the day? And I will, my next slide here. We had a survey that we pushed out to the group here today. So out of those responding to that survey, a little over about 36% of those respondents said they had experienced AR and VR through mostly the educational uses at their community colleges or at their plants and other facilities there. About 36% they had some knowledge of this or had used it, where another 32% had never experienced it before. And then the rest were kind of pulled into gaming, and it was a big one right there. So with that said, I'm thinking about the different folks that are on this call today. And what I thought I would do is I'm going to pull out of this slide for a second. And if you give me 1 second, I'm going to share.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Does someone give me a confirmation that you see a screen with a workbench on it?
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much here. So what I want to show you here, and just is a brief little look at use cases that are already existing. There's a lot of people out there that are wondering, you know, am I behind the game? Should I already be doing these things? Is it just getting started? Well, the topic of actually the subtitle of our of this webinar is Ready for Prime Time, Making AR and VR Work for You. And I can assure you that the people on this call today and my other co-host over here, we've been at this for quite a long time, and this is not new. This is something that is in place, and right now we're looking at a quick little brief look at a complete remake of I'm going to stop this for just a second, a complete remake of a shop right here in 360 video. Everything you had touch can be, excuse me over here, I gotta take a sip of water here. Thank you. Everything you see here is 6 degrees of freedom, which means with a headset on, you can interact with everything you're seeing here. You could literally future-proof a shop or a classroom for the ability to come in at home or jointly to review, to look through, to practice in a safe environment. This next piece, we all talk about virtual learning right now, but also meetings. Anything anywhere, if you are in a position to have a meeting, we can create this virtual environment. We'll show this a little deeper today. And you can bring your own media in. This is a plug and play solution with avatars that you're able to be in these rooms, different parts of the world, but bring in media along with that. Another plug and play example, this is a augmented reality digital twin that had been set in an office environment over here. You can see we can add movement, we can add annotations, we can pinch and zoom. This can be combined with video and other, there you go, videos and other aids, whether it be for learning, for training, for selling, showing this piece, when you can't do it in today's environment. And at home. Here's a quick little look at a human hologram, someone that might want to be able to, an important message that might need to be pushed out to the workforce or to learners. And then the last couple pieces here, we're showing a complete, either in VR or AR, a complete curriculum that can be built in plug and play, whether it be for labs or in the workforce over there. So I'm going to roll this down right now because what we're here today is to talk and listen to a couple of my partners. And we have a wide variety of abilities between everybody here today. One being for the ability for you to create your own content, some tools that you can put into place. Others where we can help you with this, whether they be software, whether they be content solutions. So without any further ado here, I'm going to hand this mic and host back over to Hugh Seaton. He's the general manager of Adept XR Learning, which is part of the Glimpse Group. So Hugh, if you want to take that, I will push over to you.
Thank you. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm just going to really quickly admit a bunch of people. So Jim, I will grab back the screen share. Here we go. All right. So as Jim mentioned, I run a unit within a broader company called the Glimpse Group. I'll chat about them in just a sec. And I wanted to, I had a feeling that the kind of distribution of people that have got, can I actually ask real quick for everybody on the call, can you please all mute yourself? Just so that folks that are shuffling papers and all that won't disturb others. Thank you. So as I say, I had a feeling that the distribution would be sort of like it is. About a third have some knowledge, another third have a sense of it from gaming, and then about a third don't know anything. But also I wanted to focus us on what I'm personally very passionate about, and that's using this medium and this set of media for learning. So we're going to go through VR as a learning medium. And along the way, if you have questions, pop them into the chat or stop me if you're able. Before I start, the Glimpse Group is based, to the degree anyone's based anywhere. We're based in New York. About 60 people dedicated to VR and AR. Teams across the U.S. now, like everybody is, as well as in Europe. Done a lot of different things, both from an academic standpoint and an industry standpoint. And not to get into this too much, but one of the points of our approach is these are 8 different groups within that 60 that are focused on different technologies and different markets. So we've got folks that really specialize in multi-user VR. How do you make that a rich experience? So a couple of folks that do augmented reality, and I won't get too deeply into that. Some modeling specialists, some data visualization specialists, and as some of the names on the right would imply, folks focused on healthcare. My team is corporate and higher education generally. And I have been at this as an adjunct professor myself, but also as an e-learning writer and e-learning technology sort of passionate person for well over a decade. I've been teaching for longer than that. So for me, I find VR, and have found it since about 2015, as just a really amazing medium for doing a lot of things that we've always wanted to do in learning, but do them more. And I'll get into what I mean by that. I kind of talked about this already. So we've, as you say on the right, we've done some stuff with some universities, but also a nice broad range of corporate clients kind of across the board. And this is going to matter because some of what I also want to cover in my time is the idea that I think Jim has mentioned a moment ago that we're ready for prime time, and part of that is deployment, is making this really work on a real campus as opposed to for one or two people in a lab somewhere. So we'll talk a little bit about real deployment, and some of that comes from some hard-won lessons elsewhere. So let me start with a framework for when VR is best. And honestly, there's a number of these floating around, and they're all based on the fact that you're in a space, whereas you're not in any other medium. And it's really best when a few things are present. They don't all have to be present, but here's some good guidelines as you think about when VR is best. And it's important to keep in mind not to think of virtual reality. And I'll get to augmented reality a little bit later. For the moment, I'm going to focus on VR a bit more. When you think about it, is it physical? Well, let me back up. Also, don't necessarily think about whether this is good for an entire course, because I think there's still value in a video, and there's still value in just a PDF to give somebody a list and a high-level overview. So when you think about this, it's more like, how could I really bring to life pieces of learning, key elements of learning, just like a lab in a lot of courses. So is what you're trying to teach or trying to get someone to really understand, does it have a physical element to it? Is there a procedural element to it? Again, we find a lot of times when you have to do one thing then another, actually doing it in VR is much better than sort of abstractly watching somebody else do it. And that actually relates to the next one, which is experiential. Is there value in experiencing it? One of the things I'll talk about in a moment is VR is the only truly first-person medium out there. Video is a little weird when they break the fourth wall, which is why they call it breaking the fourth wall. A little less relevant, but sometimes when you think about some vocational skills, you think about whether it's chemistry and some of the other sciences, things can be dangerous sometimes, especially to practice over and over again. It's one thing if you're teaching welding or you're teaching engineering or you're teaching chemistry to do some things in a highly kind of supervised setting, but people can't practice in a they can, it's just expensive to practice in a highly supervised setting. VR allows people to go through the same thing repeatedly, so they begin to build up the intuition that experience is able to give you. And that kind of leads to the last one. Sometimes things are expensive for a number of reasons. It can be that they're expensive because of the systems that are being used or the equipment, or just the fact that you're taking time out of multiple people's day to be able to be there for the training. So as you think about when immersive media like VR and AR are valuable, here are some guidelines for when they can be. So the next thing I'd like to have you think about is in virtual reality and to an extent augmented reality, everything comes through a computer. That's not true of almost anything else. So everything the person is experiencing comes through a computer, which means I can do things that I can't do anywhere else. So as an example, if I show you a video, it technically comes through a computer, but what is holding that video isn't coming through a computer. So I can't tell whether you're looking at it or not. In the case of VR, I can tell exactly where you're looking. So one of the things to think about when you, again, think about this idea that everything comes through a computer is it gives you some abilities that are either impossible or just really difficult to do in the real world. One of them is you can create anything. So Jim showed you two examples, and in a moment I'll show you some more, where people have, we didn't do that one, where people have recreated scenes in an incredible fidelity. But also you can create things that don't exist, or you can create them in ways that they don't exist. So for example, again, hearkening back to what Jim showed you 10 minutes ago, you're seeing a boiler that you can bend and you can break, but you can also make that boiler pop right back in a way that you could never do in reality. You can make that boiler glow green if it's helpful to the learning. You can make things float in front of that, which I will show you in just a second, to help somebody understand what they're seeing and understand what they're experiencing. we've done things with higher education where we recreated Shakespeare's Globe, for example, which is fun. I mean, imagine giving a speech where Shakespeare was originally performed. We've done things with 360 where we brought people to Africa where they're seeing real lions, right there in front of them. So you're able to create really to the point where we have only started to scratch the surface of what that incredible flexibility offers. And the expense of doing a lot of these things is not as crazy as you'd think because people are very good at it now. There's a lot of talent out there that can help develop, design, and model pretty much anything you might want. And related to that, as I mentioned earlier, everything you do in VR is coming through a computer, which means I can write code, or we have already written code, depending on what it is, that will track it for us. So in this case, it's a funny little screen grab, but you can see what people are looking at. But what's important about this, unfortunately, it's funny, when I was looking for graphics for this, I saw a lot of heat maps, which some of you may know from web development. And I actually don't like that for VR because I think it forgets that you don't have to be, you can be quantitative in your tracking in a way that you just can't be anywhere else. So for example, I can tell if you look at on the left, it says demo 3, I can tell how long demo 3 was looking at the table, or that looks like there's a magazine there. I can tell, to the millisecond, how long they've been looking at something, did they look back at it, and so on and so forth. And you think about that in a learning, kind of in a learning context, and there's a few things that come out of it. One is I can begin to understand how somebody is improving over time at a quantitative level, not just golly, it looks like Jim's doing a better job today. I can tell you Jim is doing 15.5% better than he was yesterday. And it's varying by, I don't know, 10% plus or minus. In a way, and so you really begin to understand things in a way that you just couldn't before. The other thing that is important about what I just said, though, is I can also optimize the learning itself. I can start to say, you know what, people keep having a problem with this step, so let's make it easier in VR, or ask them if it's VR that's getting in the way, or it's the instruction that's getting in the way, or if that step is something we should be spending more time explaining and having people understand. Because you have this new layer of understanding, which honestly, even whether it's in academia, whether it's in industry, it's a new thing for a lot of people. And one of the things I love about my job is I get to explore how to use these new tools with folks that really understand learning and really understand their subject matter, but don't always understand the medium itself. So I hinted at this earlier. Here's a project we did with a pharmaceutical. I'm going to show you a video of it, but before I do, I want you to see this. This is what they call a column packing machine, and it's very common in pharmaceuticals as a way to pack down the chemicals. And setting it up is important. If you set it up incorrectly, it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars of wasted chemicals and kind of processed chemicals. So as a result, it's really important that this get done well. Well, as you can imagine, they don't have tags sticking out a foot in the air, and they don't have lime green connectors. That's something that we added so that learners can walk into an experience without somebody guiding them through every single step, and are able to really understand it and learn it in a much easier way. So I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with the idea of scaffolding. There is no better way to do it than in VR, because I can put things in the middle of the air. I can make, I can tag things. And what's more important is once I've done that, I can pull those back with the kind of the faded examples idea that you probably come across as well. So this is a quick video of what I was showing. I want to skip ahead because it's kind of long. But you can see here, we recreated this room from scratch. So they go in and they do a PPE, which is great. And they really experience what it's like to be doing different things. And again, it's going to pop ahead. You're in the same room. Here we go. So this is what you saw earlier. And the learner is being taught how to connect what to what. And if they get it wrong, they're told, do it again. And what's important about this, as I say, is you can see throughout the room, we've really filled it with different elements of learning and elements of the process. You can see there's that little animation that's saying, avoid floor contamination. It's a clean room, so these hoses can't touch the floor. If they do, they actually disappear. Another little trick you can do in VR. But you can also see the fidelity with which we've recreated this. And it's making noise that you can't hear. So that's a quick little video. It actually winds up being a nice process where you're training someone on every step and every piece of this. So let me move on. There we go. So I'll take a step, take a breath here. The next thing that is important, so I just talked about the fact that it all goes through a computer, and you can create anything, you can track anything, you can add in the air itself, you can add learning aids, things that make it easier and faster for someone to learn. The next thing that's very unique to virtual reality is you're the first person. And that matters because we focus on things differently when they happen to us as opposed to someone else. It's the difference between watching, a conversation through a window and sitting at the table yourself. You've heard this idea of immersion, which I'll get to in a moment, and potentially you've heard of this idea of presence. And both of them matter because it's happening to you, and you are the center of the experience. Similarly, VR is at its best when the learner has agency, when the learner is able to affect things. And most of what you would do in VR, that's the best way to do it, is that the learner is able to do things, go through different parts of a process and really experience it themselves. Now, there's another piece that is almost, it's half hardware and half just kind of the content you create. The VR headset, what you're seeing in front of you is the one that most of us use now, which is the Oculus Quest. There are others out there, but this has just been, from a price and value standpoint, a really good way to go. The new one I don't have a good picture of, so this is the one that was state of the art until about a month ago. And the key thing to keep in mind here is, unlike anything else, whether it's a laptop or a laptop or a phone, you can't look anywhere else. Like, the point of a VR headset is it's blocking out the rest of the world. And there's a couple things that does. Obviously, you have to be focused on the lesson itself. But the second thing that it does that's really interesting is it removes disconfirming evidence. So if I'm trying to convince you that you're really in a factory, or you're really in a chemical plant, or you're really fighting a fire, whatever it might be, it's a lot easier for you to really absorb and integrate the lesson when there's nothing telling you, actually, no, you're not. You're at your home on your desk, or you're in a movie theater, whatever it might be. Because of that really full immersion, you're able to create something in VR that we call presence. And this is the belief in the kind of the illusion that you're being shown. So this presence is the idea that you forget for a moment that actually I'm not standing in my office or sitting at my den, or at my desk, but I actually am wherever they say I am. I'm on a beach, I'm in a factory, whatever. And that's really important for a number of reasons. As I say, the lessons are much more real when you feel like they happen to you. And the thing about presence is, everybody on this call, whether you've been in VR or not, have experienced that. If you've ever lost track of time while you were reading a novel, or watching a movie, or listening to a story, it's an old idea called narrative transportation. But in VR, it's much more powerful, much more easy to create with a good story and good graphics. So, and here's a little bit more about us and our approach is for the first bunch of years, most of the way VR was delivered was a little bit more siloed. Like, we're creating one thing and we're going to, this is the experience, and it may or may not have some data coming out of it. Where the world has evolved to now is these are actually digital assets that you can replicate cheaply and immediately. So one of the things, for example, that we do often with university clients is make it possible to create, 5 or 6 breakout rooms that study groups can each have. So only that study group can access it, and only and of course their teacher can as well. So what is happening now is, again, if you'd asked 3 years ago, I'd say it's great and there's some good stuff happening. Here's your, $900 headset. Hopefully you don't trip over the wires. Now it's, here's your $300 headset. Depending on how you buy it, and also here's your mature ability to add users, capture their grades, capture what they're doing in VR, assign them to tasks, assign them to classes or to labs, but also limit that assignment so they're only there for, for however long you want it to be, anything from an hour to an entire semester. So what's important about where virtual reality is now is it really is maturing as a learning medium. So a lot of the skills and thinking that people have learned over years of running classes are now valid and now applicable. What you see here behind you is just a quick screen grab of our analytics page. So this is an example of, as I mentioned earlier, sort of managed experiences. So what you're able to do, this is actually a breakout room, and there was a bigger than average group in there just sort of writing on a whiteboard. Again, now we're able to recreate in VR a lot of the things that are part of learning, excuse me, part of learning and part of kind of the classroom experience. So without getting into all the details, you can see there's the ability behind this is the ability to project. Right here, you've got the ability to use a whiteboard. You can kind of see there, which is a lot of fun because for the first time in your life, you don't run out of markers, and even the red one works, which I always find fun. But the bigger point here is, again, it's become like an LMS administered experience instead of some weird thing that you have to, get a TA or get somebody to manage for you. And similarly, Jim mentioned earlier, the idea that you can pull in different media into VR. And what's important about this is most people, most instructors, most educators have had, over time, have found things that help make the point, whether it's an image or it's a video or it's, content that they've created. And rather than saying, you're going to have to throw all that out, we're going to recreate it for you, you're able to pull in any medium. So whether it's video, whether it's audio, whether it's 360 video, PDFs, so on and so forth. And, because the world has gotten very good at this with websites, we just replicated the same thing. So you just upload it like you upload anything else. And then when you decide you want to create a class, you go into a library, which is what this is, and you tick a box and boom, you've got it. Everything from, you can even see in the lower right, we actually took screen grabs of code because why wouldn't we? So what's interesting about this, again, is that the skills that people have kind of built over time managing other media, whether it's, as I say, WordPress or learning management systems, there's no reason those shouldn't carry over and be applicable here. Just looking at something really quick. And this led to, honestly, a bit of a surprise. This, for us anyway, is that you're actually in a media player. So an example of this is what you're seeing here. This is actually what every user in our platform has a kind of a menu hovering over their left hand. And this allows them to use tools. So we've got this really cool speech to text note taker. So you can make sticky notes. That's what's under tools, as well as your own notes. The media here, you've got 360 videos, images, project videos, and so on and so forth. And then objects. So you can pull in 3D objects if those are relevant. And the cool thing with all these media is there's tons of it out there for free. Whether it's 3D objects, and we can help you with this if you're ever interested, but there are places where you can get these for free and pull them in. And media, obviously, you just Google it if you want it. So the broader point I'm making, though, is when you're putting a headset on, it already is a media player, which means suddenly you have the ability to flexibly, easily replicate and give people whatever media you think is going to help them with their learning in a way that's much easier than sending it off to their phone or their laptop, whatever. It's everybody in the same room. By the way, there's some great questions here that I'm going to get to in just a moment. In fact, right now. So the last piece I wanted to talk through, and then I'll go through these. If you guys don't mind, Craig, I'm just going to answer some of these questions because they're right here. But I want to talk a little bit about deploying VR. It is not that much harder than getting a new kind of display. What we've found is funny things show up as being not really a challenge, just a thing to deal with. You want to connect with IT early. Your partner, whether it's us or someone else, will be good at this, so they'll be able to speak all day long to IT about what to be thinking about. We found, funny enough, that Wi-Fi often is harder in a higher education setting than it is in anything corporate, including a hospital. Probably because students bring so much crazy stuff on to campus. So it takes some thinking. It's not very hard. It's just we have to tell you what port to open, believe it or not. Spend time planning about managing new lightweight gear. So this again is something we've done a lot of, but you now have something it's about, it's like a big hat, but inside of it is the equivalent of a mobile phone. So you want to think about how you're going to manage that. How are you going to keep it clean? There are some very easy ways to do that. You can just buy a little plastic rubber cover that allows you to disinfect it super easily. But also, and I hinted at this earlier, the role of VR in your course. So we've done both. We've done courses where VR was honestly most of it. Believe it or not, that was an English course because she loved how experiential it was, and she had people writing things. It was also an online asynchronous course, which made that easier. Or is it just a lab? Obviously, if it's going to be a major part of the course, you're going to need more hardware. So that's kind of an interesting one. Expect your VR partner to help along the way. We do this with everybody. You assume even after we've handed it off, that we're there for you to help make sure it all works. And in the very beginning, often you're going to expect somebody to be there just to troubleshoot the fact that it's new technology. So I've got a couple more minutes, and I'm going to answer some of these questions that are in the chat. So we resource libraries that educators can access. I think that's the first one, right? Yes. Actually, before that, for Greg, I did try to balance theory and applications, and I think we can also talk further about applications, but hopefully it was a good balance. Libraries for educators depends a little bit on what you want. So right now, simulations in labs, no, not really. It's a little too specific. There are configurators you can use, and like we have rooms that you can put things in and recreate it very quickly. Right now, there's a lot out there. So there are people who've created things. It's not anywhere near as developed a market as other things might be. So there are things. It's just, as I say, it's a little bit more limited, and we find sometimes people are unsatisfied with what's coming off the shelf and want to either tweak it or redo it. So I've mentioned white paper. We do have one. I'll share it with the NACTC. NCATC. I'm so bad at this. Excuse me. So state of the art about a month ago. It isn't that people are on the bleeding edge. It's just that they came out with another product. That's all. There's a Quest 2, which is better, faster, cheaper. The thing about that question, Greg, though, is jumping in isn't a problem because the underlying technology that we use to create this isn't going to change. We work with Unity. There's another one called another gaming engine called Unreal. Both of those can export the same thing that you've built to new hardware as it comes out. Sometimes there are some tweaks, but generally it works very well. So the answer is you're creating it in a kind of a Photoshop, and you can output it to be a JPEG, or you can output, this is a bit of a strained analogy, but you get my idea, hopefully. So no, you're not jumping in too early now. To say the asset that you build can be re-exported and reconfigured as new things come out. So the last question, do you have recommendations for how to pull this into middle schools and high schools where budgets are kind of constrained? That's AR is probably the better way to do it. I'll tell you something you can all do literally right now. I mean, obviously you're going to want to pay rapt attention, but after this conversation is over, go onto your phone, and if you have Google Chrome, whether it's an iOS device or whether it's Android, it only works on Chrome. Go and Google, literally Google AR, specifically AR animals, but also AR, I believe it's objects. What's cool about this is your own phone right now, you can do things like covalent bonds. I mean, it's crazy. I was looking at it last night. The circulatory system and covalent bonds and all sorts of fun stuff. I'm happy to actually screen share that after Eon is done, when we have our kind of chat after 3:30. But right away you can do things just with what your phone and your tablet already has on it. And as you think about getting smart about how you might use it and gathering a little bit more experience and intuition, I think that a couple things are going to happen. One of them is the hardware is going to continue to get better, faster, cheaper. We're very much in the brick phone. It's not quite brick phone. Maybe we're at the flip phone era. We're not at the smartphone era for VR yet. Where we expect to be in a number of years is headsets that are essentially sunglasses that are probably tethered to a phone. I mean, there's a bunch of speculation. And again, everything you create now will work then. You may decide to redo it, but regardless, that's just the kind of how content goes. So anyway, the short answer is, for when budgets are really constrained, the first thing I would do is, as I said, work with AR and think about what you can get off the shelf. We have a really cool AR application that I'm happy to share with you, as I say, afterwards. I think that is my time. Am I right, Craig?
Yep. At 2:45, we're switching to Eon and Jamie. But thank you. That was amazing.
Perfect. So Jamie, I'm going to just give us a sec, folks. I got to find Jamie and make him the host.
All right. Thank you.
All right. You have the con.
All right. Thank you. And one more button to push here, and we're good to go. Confirm for me there, Frank, so once you can see my screen.
Looks great.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Hugh. So good afternoon, everyone. It's great pleasure to be here today. I've just did a little research before talking about it, and as I'm always want to do, I reflect on VR and XR through my journey. And 17 years ago in 1 month, I did my very first presentation on virtual reality in higher education at the NCATC conference in Portland, Oregon. And so kind of see a good connection back there to the past. And I think that with that sharing of that story, it will bring some perspective on where we are and where things are going, I think, in the XR field of all uses of mixed reality, augmented and virtual reality, and so forth. So again, I'm Jamie Justice. I'm Director of Education, U.S. and Global Innovation with Eon Reality. I'm here with my colleague and dear friend, Frank Botdorf, who is our business developer, and he'll be talking with you in the question and answer session. And I'll let him tell you more about the company at his time. But to me, Eon is an enabler company. We enable you to use technology in unique and different ways to apply augmented and virtual reality, mixed reality, hardware systems, et cetera, into teaching and learning, into training, or other commercial aspects. And Eon has been around for 21 years, and our main office is located in Irvine, California. And again, I'll let Frank maybe talk to that later in today. So what I want to do, though, is first I want to kind of bring a perspective of how all this fits together in teaching and learning, and see if I can get my slideshow to work here. It's not wanting to participate with me. Let me stop sharing for just a second and try it once again. There we go. And all right, so now let's try it this time. There we go. Sorry about that. So basically, Hugh talked a little bit about what is XR and VR, and he did a great job of providing you an overview of that everything comes through the computer and or it's overlaid from your virtual world. And that's what this image represents. And as I think about looking at where we are and where things have gone to in the last 17 years or 18 years of my time of being in VR, and to kind of give a little bit of that story for some perspective as well. I'm retired out of the Kentucky Community and Technical College system. I worked in the System Office Director of Technical Education Workforce Development at that time under Chancellor Keith Berg. And I was given the charge around 2002 of looking at ways that virtual reality could supplement and enhance the teaching, learning, and training process for workforce development, for technical education, and technical training. And I've been on that journey. I don't think I've ever left it. And that's part of, I guess, why after I retired, I landed where I did. So as we see now, what's evolved since then is this virtual reality versus augmented reality. Is that, virtual reality is what we've always known in the past, and again, it is everything comes from the computers, computer generated, and augmented reality is that overlay of the real virtual world onto the real world, and then mixed reality are some variations of those two integrated together. But looking back over that time period, and why I shared that I came from out of higher education, is that we know that there were 82% have not yet moved beyond the pilot stages in adoption of augmented or virtual reality. 28% of higher education institutions have engaged at some level. And I saw in the survey there are a lot of questions about, is it ready for prime time yet? Cost of it, and so forth. And I can say that all those things, I think, have finally come to a point in that we've gone from this place of what I call random acts of progress using VR, AR, to a new level of application. And what do I mean by that? So everything prior to 2020, to me, was a random act of progress. And I don't say that to demean anything that's been done, because there is tremendous, awesome, great stuff out there that people have been doing and have been using this for over the ages. But we're still talking about today in context of some of the questions that I saw is it ready to come to prime time? Are we ready to use it? And where do we go from here? And to me, that's where we are in the whole process now. And that we go from those random acts of progress, those successful things that allowed us to create virtual reality solutions to help improve the learning process, to now where we can strategically apply those in ways that we can change educational practice. Pandemic notwithstanding, everything changed in 2020, right? So after 2020, what's all different? Well, we had a pandemic. We've got that one going for us. But there's some other factors that changed before we even started. First of all, the advent of 5G is going to change how we communicate with our devices and the way we can share data across those smart devices, more so than we have in the past. Larger pipes, more ability to share bulky, more full content. Artificial intelligence changes the way that devices interface with us. Virtual reality becomes more accessible through new head-mounted devices, whether it's Oculus Quest 2, Oculus Quest, HTC Vive, and any other number of head-mounted devices that are on the market. Also, along this time period of after 2020, AR changes the way we work, play, and learn. We saw that Pokemon Go was kind of a game changer and that people started playing that. We now see very, very common places and looking growth of augmented reality being used in marketing and in games and in training and teaching is emerging rapidly. And it's easy to do and affect. And so in that respect, AR is going to be a major game changer in the future. Content creation is much different now than it was prior to 2020. You build it once and you deploy it on multiple devices. One of the things that amazes me most about the EonXR platform is the ability to get content from a variety of sources, manipulate that into a lesson, export it in real time in a variety of ways, whether it's smartphone, tablets, PCs, head-mount displays, in AR or VR mode. And so all those pieces are finally starting to come together. And then throw onto that the contact time and dependence on our digital devices continuing to grow. It's no longer just the kids who have their phone all the time. We all have to admit it that we're probably more connected than we should be or want to be at times, but we're always connected in that process. So after 2020, and after the fact that we've become more virtual and we need to find better ways to interact with each other and to teach and to train and prepare, is that the ability to do that is here. Now it's a matter of us just thinking differently about teaching and learning and training and how we deploy and use technologies like this to make a change. And to me, I've been thinking about this a lot in the last week, and I've come now to this conclusion that I think there are basically 4 constructs that enable XR integration. And what I hope to do in the time of my presentation here is to show you some examples of that and kind of touch on each one of these very lightly, but give an example of how we can use the technology. And a lot of it has changed and a lot of it hasn't changed over the past 20 years. I mean, one is that virtual reality can put someone in a high-dollar, high-risk environment without actually putting them in that high-dollar, high-risk environment. In short, I can blow up a machine and it didn't cost a fortune. I didn't get killed. I didn't hurt someone else. And I can, as Hugh mentioned, we can track data and see performance and see, that this person did it in 5 steps, that one did it in 10, it took this long, and so forth. So you can do all kinds of variations on your training and how you deploy that. So that's one of the key things that is here. And then the other key part of virtual reality and augmented reality in education is that we find where it fits. And where it fits, and where it doesn't, we don't force it just because we have cool tools. So with those 2 mindsets, I think about the 4 constructs. And the first is curriculum alignment, structure, modalities of instruction, and resources. So I want to quickly look at those, and then I want to show you some examples. So first of all, let's talk about curriculum alignment. It's that strategic identification of your content, finding those fits, those places where VR is the best solution, AR may be the best solution, or a video may be the best solution, or this one we still need to do hands-on. Or it may be the fit is, I can no longer do hands-on. How can I do that using an augmented or virtual reality application so that a student can access it whenever or wherever they are and be engaged in different ways? So in curriculum alignment, it's pretty simple and straightforward. If you're in education, you've probably seen multiple variations of these curriculum crosswalks. And, you know, starting basically with what the course is. So, for example, maybe an industrial maintenance course in maintenance of small tools or machine maintenance or something like that. Any one of these categories, what standards you have to meet, what are your learner outcomes, and so forth. And everybody has this in place. They have all those goals, objectives, and things that they need to accomplish. So it's very easy to quickly take a quick look and think about high-level topics where augmented or virtual reality may improve this method of instruction or improve this class. And then you might look at really chunking that down to those small things that I could think about now for where I might use a XR solution to teach this lesson, especially in this remote environment. So, you know, if I look, I might do something on hand tools. I might do something on machines or devices or things that students may not have access to at home, or things that are important that I need details, or maybe some mundane things that are often a little hard to engage students with that they may find a little bit more exciting to use in a virtual or augmented way. So that one is basically you align your curriculum, you develop your lesson plans, you do your matches, and you see where those fits are, and then you think about how you deploy it through your learning management system or through your own links to the platform, for example. So next we come to structure. What is the structure that has to be in place to enable XR to be used in the curriculum, and especially creating multi-user learning experiences and engaging students in different ways outside and inside of the classroom? So it could be infused both in face-to-face instruction, and it could also be embedded into online education with real hands-on experiences using these technologies that can engage students in different ways. So let's take a little closer look at what structure actually means. All right, so those 6 steps to me, structure is really the means in which XR provides a way to, first of all, build. And what I mean by building is that you can build it once and you can deploy it in many ways. So if you have any number of assets that you can access, you can build a lesson around those assets, and it has to be easy to put out and to share and put in the hands of the students. And to contextualize that with some of my experience from the past and why I think 2020 is different, in 2008, I built an application, my team, for the Kentucky Coal Academy on a self-contained self-breathing apparatus used by underground coal miners. And we had a great simulation created. And we had student guides, instructor guides, and we even won top 3 awards from the Mine Safety and Health Administration. But at the end of the day, I really had very few to no users at all. And the problem was I had to share it on a CD. They had to upload a viewer. Then after they got it uploaded, they may find that their computer was or wasn't powerful enough to actually run that application. Spring forward to 2020, and now through the XR platform as an example, I can build that same lesson in just a few minutes. And as soon as I'm finished, I can share it with students via their phone devices, head-mount display, AR, VR mode. It all kind of happens automatically. And so there's no cost anymore as there was in the past. You know, when I was trying to do that before, we may have tried to run it through a multi-projector system to do a stereographic presentation, like what I shared with the group back in Portland all those many years ago. So building is one key part of the structure. The second part of structure is access, and how do you provide access for students? And I like to think about it that XR provides access for students to learn whenever and wherever they are. So they can be on the bus ride home, they can be in their kitchen, they can be in their classroom, they can be on the playground, in the backyard, wherever they may be. If they are ready and lessons are designed for that independent study like that, they can get on. Or if we're doing live instruction via the internet, as most of us are now, Zoom meetings and so forth, they could also access this training in an organized class setting in some location. Another part of structure provides a way to create and access to a large repository of building assets. And I mentioned, Eon's been around for 21 years. There's been digital assets that have been created for probably 20 plus years in tools like 3ds Max or CAD or other file formats, that those don't go away. We don't have to throw them away. Some things change, some things don't change, but we can adapt those and bring all those assets together and use those assets to create new and exciting lessons in ways that we never thought about before. So we have access to all of the growth, those random acts of progress from the past, so that we can use those and deploy those today. Structure also has to provide a way to share content. And as I mentioned before, that's the most important thing. As I gave my Cole Academy analogy, it was difficult to share it. Now we can create links. We can assign lessons to individual users. We can put together user groups. We can share it in multiple ways using our smart devices. Another part of the structure is management, how you manage the students, the data, the assets, the lessons, the learning management systems, and all those interfaces. That's all part of the structure that needs to occur to implement it. And again, it's easily done, and it's already there through the platform. But lastly, and probably the most important, is a structure has to provide a way to engage. You have to engage students in a variety of ways and a variety of modalities, which will be our next topic, to better engage them in the learning process so they take ownership of it to improve learning, retention, attainment, and so forth as they go forward. Student engagement comes through self-directed learning, hands-on applications, and smart application of augmented and virtual reality. So to kind of cap on those a little bit, looking at Eon's platform, we have access to all of those assets from the past, and then also premium assets, partnerships that allow you to grab content to create your lessons themselves. And then once you start creating a lesson, as you see in this screen here, this lesson is one I created on MIG welding gun. And you're thinking about students do not have MIG welding gun at home. This way we can teach topics like wire stick out, feed rates, gas, makeup of a torch, how that's all work. And then on these two topic areas here, you'll see, if I have time at the end, I'll show you this look as well. Those are where those links occur that allow me to share that content in real time and also manage the students. So these two screenshots kind of in a nutshell capture that full process. And then we can take a quick look now, and I'll do some more. I have a little video snap here of that lesson on that welding gun that was created that shows how the students can interact with it. They can do exploded views, but you can also, students can't access your classroom anymore. So you can record your demonstration that you would do with them in the class. And now they can access and see that demonstration while they're working with an object. So it's another piece of engagement in the lesson that allows them to be fully engaged in their own learning and take responsibility for it. But you're also there as an instructor providing your oversight and guidance. And that comes through things like text-to-speech that's embedded inside of the lesson, that comes from a recording process and a step of sequence of actions that take place here. This is built very much on the same level in many ways as creating PowerPoint. And so this, for example, is an instructor walking students through a demonstration. And in this case, he might be talking about wire stick out or nozzle types for high voltage or low voltage or amperage, I guess the correct term would be. And we can do it in a display mode. And then at the same time, the student can play this lesson in an AR or a VR mode, embedded with questions and quizzes, dissection modes, and other ways to engage with the students. So there's a lot of content that can be built around this piece of training. So you see all those labels that were appearing there. Each one of those labels could have its own video, its own text-to-speech, its own instruction, and provide a lot of ways that students can learn about this object that maybe they really don't even get in the real world, because now it's personal and it's in their hands and they can work with it. This example is of a desktop application. So let's go a little bit further now, and let's talk about those modalities of instruction. How do you increase student engagement through using research documents for them to do some research on a lesson or a topic, and then build the lesson themselves and share that lesson with their classmates? That's a triple reinforcement of the lesson experience. Gathering the research is one learning, deciding how to put that research into a lesson is a second learning, presenting that with their classmates in a multi-user environment is a third piece of that, and those lead to other resources that can be there. So let's take a look at a couple of examples here. In multi-user, we can create that lesson, and you'll see it inside of an app, and a link will be sent to students just like we're doing this Zoom meeting today. And they will log on from their tablet or their phone, and you can see over here on the right-hand side the names of all the students who are in this lesson. The presenter here, Jordan, in this case, is doing a demonstration on this habitation module and talking about this particular item, whatever it is. And now one of the students is asking a question, and every student in the classroom hears this. You switch off presenters, and now this student is engaged in talking about what that piece is. Or maybe you have another topic, students are working together. Again, they're in that multi-user session and experience. So think about it as an interactive classroom from a remote location, where all the students are involved in the lesson and the teaching at the same time, but they're able to be involved in around a particular model or an application. So let's take a look at another concept. And this one we call a virtual twin, really. But think about, you can take an object that is a 3D digital asset. You can place that into an AR mode. You can lay that out on the workspace. And now you can begin students replicating the process with the real world. So you're using the virtual world through AR, overlapped with the application that will allow us to see how the breadboard's put together and how things are built, and so forth. So this is just another example of one creative way that you can use this lesson or application. So again, this is part of that engagement strategy to share the methods of how things are put out of those 6 steps that we talked about in student activities. So let's take a look at one more, and then I'll check my time. I'll make sure I can do maybe a quick live demonstration of part of it. All right, so now let's take a look at, in this particular scenario, we can start that meeting, as I just shared with you, as a multi-user. This is around an asynchronous motor. Or we can play the lesson in the desktop version like you saw earlier when I did the welding gun. But now I can launch it straight into a head mount display. And what you're going to see here is what it looks like inside of that head mount display. And what really becomes different is now you can play this application inside of a variety of environments that also adds to and improves the learning experience. Looking around this space, the student may actually see several asynchronous motors just like this. And I'm moving my head a little quickly when I'm doing this, but you can look, and now I can take this asynchronous motor, I can do it in exploded view, and this is actually through my HTC Vive. I can have animations that are built into it. I can change the size. I can actually make it bigger than life size. I can actually go so large I'm standing inside of the motor. So all those different perspectives drive different thinking about the way that you learn and the way you teach and the way that you engage students in that process. So inside of this same experience, we have video that's built in. And the thing, I guess the key point that I want to make is that we build it once and we deploy it in many different ways. And so in this case, this could also be played in an AR mode, as we showed earlier. It could be in that multi-user mode. It could be on the desktop, or it could be straight here in this VR experience. But all the same lesson content comes from that one time that you build it. You can edit it. You can change it around. You can add to it for future uses. It all exists in the platform. And so students can access it whenever they have the link. And you can give them that link through their LMS. You can give it to them by direct email, by screenshot, or whatever. So this is what it looks like inside of a head mount display. And I just want to give you that one other perspective of uses and multi-uses. So now moving along, I want to come down to the last part of those 4 constructs. And these are the resources. These are the tools that are required to access these learning modalities and how you can increase engagement and retention to this instruction in a new and different way. So I mentioned earlier, excuse me, large repository of digital assets that are available from actually the beginning, let's say, of VR. Because, any 3D asset you can create, it's probably around somewhere yet, whether it's on a website or in your own repository or inside of our platform library, which gives you access to several thousand, and then our partnership for premium assets. You can create these assets in tools like Unity, in 3ds Max, but you can also bring content in that are from file systems such as Solid Edge, SolidWorks, Autodesk Inventor, 3ds Max, Blender for free tools, and SketchUp. There's ways to convert and bring everything into the platform to where you can replay it. It's part of why I like to call Eon an enablement company, is that we enable you to be successful with creating these applications. Other resources include things like curriculum frameworks, lesson plans, student design briefs, assignments that challenge students to create that directed learning. So here's, for example, inside a head-mount display, again, a procedural assessment. This is a resource and how you can use assessments to capture sequences of steps that students are doing, and then we can get feedback in real time that you know, they had this final score of 76 out of 100. They did extra steps, and we were able to capture and manage that data, which goes back to one of our 4 constructs as part of the process in engaging and working with students. So I think with that, I want to show you one last thing here. We have a search engine inside of an application. So we can do queries, you can do extra experimentation, look up information online while you're live inside of the headset working with a particular model or an application. Again, one of those multiple modalities of working with things. Now, I'd like to share this particular one showing how 360 can be used to help drive engagement as well. So now we're going not only from digital assets, but we're also using 360 images and 360 streaming video to engage students. Now, what's different about this is that in the same platform where I built the 3D asset model that you saw before, I can also do that same construction here inside of this 360 environment. So think about the fact that you can't take a student into a high energy area. You cannot take them inside of a robot cage to keep this manufacturing oriented, or you can't go into a surgical suite. But you can actually do that through 360 camera, through virtual reality applications. You can infuse inside of this different lesson topics. What you're hearing right now is a text-to-speech introduction, but then again, that process of having your instructor lead a lesson from inside of this environment. Now, this one in this case is going to talk about how to set a surgical tray. Another one might be how to program a PLC, or how to set up a robot, or how to manage the hydraulic system. Or we could go even further now and start using 360 and run through some scenario-based learning experiences. So now perhaps the student watches this 360 video and they start asking questions or typing or writing a paper that says, you know, what do I observe? What did the phlebotomist do when they were taking blood, or the anesthesiologist was preparing me to go in? And now I'm in a surgical suite and I can ask the questions, what happens in here? What people are here? What's happening now? What is the sequence? And so we can drive some higher order, higher level thinking about, you know, learning through this virtual experience using 360 video. And then you can throw towards the last of that, you can put in a quiz that you know, when you see that quiz pop up, more instructor-led information. And now we can go towards the end here, and I'll squeak through and change it to quiz mode, and we can build quizzes around each one of those topics so that you can add some instruction to it. All right, so with that, I think that comes close to this part of the presentation, but I thought if time permits here, and I can see that I've got about 4 minutes left, I did want to share with you very quickly what a student experience might look like in a cell phone. And so I'm going to drag my phone app over here in front of this, and you're looking at right now our platform here where I would build and create a lesson. This is what that library looks like of all the assets that are existing, and then we also have premium assets that can also be accessed. So now for 1 second, bear with me, and we'll go into a student mode. I'll start a lesson on a water pump, and we'll let this load, and then we'll see that in this experience, this is how the student can interact with this, all this training and all these pieces. Now remember, I built it once. I've now deployed it. You've seen me deploy it in a HR mode. You've seen me deploy it in a VR mode. So now I can take this lesson and I can put it right here on the floor of my office. And in real time, this lesson that I just created, I can take it now and I can begin working with different parts. So I can learn about the shaft of this particular application, or I can go to an assignment that has me locate a particular part of the lesson. So I just wanted to give you an example of what a student lesson and experience would look like. And so I have to find the pump front. I'll double click on what I think is the pump front, and I'll say check the tick box, and I have the correct answer there as we looked at it. All right, so then I can go from here into a head mount display using Hamido glasses or a Google box or some other device such as that. So with that, I think I need to come to a conclusion, and we'll address some of your questions in just a bit. I did see several popping up, but I did want to kind of close out with a few final thoughts about where we are with this process. You know, I think with all that's going on around us, that we do live in amazing times where visual revolutions, what's been taking place. All these random acts of progress have become a new revolution in the way that we interact, we learn, we expect to learn. And that's kind of the unique place that we are, from boomers to the next generation beyond. We're going to be more dependent on visual technologies in ways we haven't yet imagined. Educators need to embrace this opportunity to engage and facilitate these immersive learning experiences so that we can better prepare our students for the future and engage with them in different ways than what we've been able to do in the past. Education is changing. New instructional modalities are always emerging, but it still remains the jobs of educators, faculty, and teachers to align, design, integrate, and put these modalities into effective learning experiences. Faculty can never be replaced. They have to lead and guide this instruction. Opportunities to create and deploy digital assets in VR, AR, and MR are finally easy to do, more cost-effective to do, and actually everything that you've seen me do today, I could have actually built those lessons inside of my cell phone at the same time as a quick one more example of what you can do inside of an application. And with that, I will take any questions that you may have. To learn any more information, you can go to eonreality.com. There is an XR app that you can download, Eon XR, from the Play Store or iOS. You can create a freemium account, and you can begin building today whenever you're ready to give that a try. And so I think if I'm out of my time, but I will hand it back over to Craig, and let us go on to the next step of the program. But thank you all for allowing me to share.
Thanks so much, Jamie. It's so good to be back in networking and working with you after all the years that we've spent together in Kentucky and further. And it's been a great session for a lot of reasons. And we just now enter the Q&A session for Hugh, Jim, and Jamie, and Frank. We've got a couple that we didn't get answered, and one of them comes from Greg Jones. From an industry's perspective, no, that's not it. It's one about basically internet connections and 5G, and I was trying to find that one, and it was where'd it go? I don't know if you guys see it, but it just disappeared. But the question was basically, how are you all finding different parts of the country available with internet connection needs and all that versus what's coming now with 5G? Will that make a big difference? Obviously it will. But basically, what are your thoughts about the current situation with Wi-Fi and internet connections in areas where it's like rural and Appalachia? Are you having any issues or solutions there?
And if I can start on that, I mean, for me, my experience as being a proud Appalachian is that I've been in remote locations. I've used the apps and have done that actually on the lake, and it works very well through the cellular network of 4G. I have used it on some limited Wi-Fi, with the occasional problems that you have with limited Wi-Fi of dropouts. But I think that where things are in the cloud, and you have, in our case, a desktop version that you begin building in, and also we have a solution where you can download your app onto your phone and use it offline as well. That kind of gets around some of those issues when you can't access it full time. Obviously, if you're uploading and building quite a complex piece of data, you do need a decent internet connection. But I think we're at a point now that it's getting more user friendly, and we're more able to share into those areas with weaker internet connections. And I've had some experience with students where we've been working remote lately who've had weaker connections, but they've still been able to participate and work using the lessons.
And I would add, if I may, I would add to that also that very little of what you're seeing is streaming. So the needs for continuous Wi-Fi are more limited than you might think. So you obviously need to have a pretty good connection when you want to download things. But even when it's multi-user, all you're doing is sending a little bit of data back and forth saying that, Jim moved his head 90 degrees to the left. So it's a less of an issue than you might think, because again, there's this idea that we're streaming all this like it was a movie, but you're not. All the heavy stuff is downloaded. And the other piece is, if it's not multi-user, you can use it in kind of without any Wi-Fi at all. Obviously, at some point, it'll need Wi-Fi again to send back analytics, but that's just a package that it can send, later.
Correct.
I've got another question here from Brian, just came in. First, he wants to say, great presentation, gentlemen. His question is, what's the biggest challenge you see to the broader application of these technologies? I guess the biggest challenge.
So if you don't mind, Jamie, I'll just jump in. I think hardware. It's much better than it was, but it's not even that expensive. It's just people aren't using it yet. I think the form factor will get better and lighter and all that, but I think availability of hardware is still the biggest constraint for us. We are often helping people buy the hardware to use our software at the same time. We don't resell it, but we make sure they get what they need and take care of it. So I think that hardware adoption is probably the biggest piece. One of the reasons we, just like Eon, have AR solutions that reflect some of the same lessons is because everyone's got a phone. The problem is you don't want to hold the phone up for too long. It starts to become a little tedious. So we're expecting that the hardware will continue to get, as I said before, better, faster, cheaper, and a kind of a blend of AR and VR, although we'll see what comes out from our friends at Apple and Facebook.
Great.
I would agree with that too. I wanted to add in that also that I think it's also finding those fits. And if you've aligned it to your curriculum, you have a plan for it, you can mitigate a lot of the challenges of hardware for right now. But until hardware gets more user friendly, I think that gets still a challenge. But I think it also comes down to the fit as well.
Great. John Troy from Monroe Community College had to leave early, but he sent me an email text or question that we wanted to ask, and I'll try to get it to you here. Have you conducted comparisons between traditional in-person instruction and the use of AR, VR in mixed reality related to learning performance? In other words, time and mastery of concepts. Pretty detailed question, but I put it in the chat for us to look at.
There's a great study that came out. So we've done things that the N size is low enough that it's a little bit more about time to competence than statistically defensible. You know what I mean? Like, it worked, but it's not at that level. PwC just put out a fantastic study, I think in August, on VR learning, and it was using modern headsets. It was a Quest actually. Using modern content and software, and they found in lots of ways it was better, and they even did an economic analysis, and in the end it was 1,400, I believe, of their principals, and they wound up rolling it out to everybody. So the data is pretty good. They were looking at specifically soft skills.
Great, and that's a real important part of the equation. 50% of all employers across all of our workforce and CTE initiatives are soft skills, workplace skills necessary, obviously. So, and
it's also a little harder to believe. It's a little harder to believe that VR is going to be better at teaching coaching. It's pretty easy to understand that if I have you practice, pulling an engine apart in VR, you're probably going to learn it better than watching it on a screen. But I like the fact that they went after the harder part.
Absolutely. Jamie or Jim, anything back on that question from you? Or
I think we have, and Frank could probably talk to better, some studies that we've done with some partners on ISIM, where we had a simulation we created with a university partner, and we saw that as a result of working with this technology, that beginning optometrists, or whatever the position would be, had more comfort with that first observation of the patient than like to a 94% better rating than they had before. They were more comfortable with that experience. And the other thing that was unique is that because of using VR, they were able to see a number of illnesses they may only see once in a lifetime in their career, and they were able to diagnose that and see it earlier. So there's some data that's built around that, and there may be a couple of other studies that Frank has that I'm not attuned to.
Great. I got one more question from an email of somebody else that needed to leave 10 minutes ago. Do you have examples of AR, VR uses or projects that are helping to overcome barriers for communities of disabilities?
Craig, I can jump in. This is Frank with Eon. We actually did a project a couple years ago with the University of Alberta in their therapeutic area. I'm not exactly sure what the official name of that particular program was, but the bottom line is it was wheelchair bound folks and trying to maneuver around, curbs and just the real world that doesn't have ramps everywhere. And in that case, we were using a large display system, VR. It's called a cave environment, if that rings a bell with anybody. Yep. Large room where you kind of walk into it, has walls and a floor being all projected with stereo 3D. In this case, we built it special for a wheelchair. And so when the person was using their hands to turn the wheels, it was actually kind of like their controller moving their movement within the VR environment. And it was some pretty interesting statistics and facts that came out of that. But that's one that I know of that I personally was working with.
And I'd expand on that there's been some good studies. We've done things where we make it ADA compliant, but it wasn't made for folks that are differently abled. There's been some really good studies though at use of VR for certain things. Especially things like whether it's things that are a little psychological, so phobias and some others. One of the issues to keep in mind is that it's a highly visual medium. There is actually 3D spatial audio that can add to it, but it isn't really a VR if it's spatial audio plus kind of a braille player. You know what I mean? So as you think about what is valuable, what is the medium specifically helping with? I think what Frank just described is a fantastic example of where it really adds a lot of value, because you can get someone to experience things that might be physically difficult to do otherwise. There's been some great work on VR for PTSD, which is not quite what the question was, but I think it's really interesting.
Great. Great. I don't see any other questions coming in, but before we decide to end this portion, I want to make a reminder that I typed in earlier to everyone that following the Q&A, Jim at AVR Connect and you at AdeptXR will stay on this feed for deeper dives in networking. If people want to do that, we will let that go as long as you let it go. And Jamie and Frank at Eon are going to do the same kind of breakout, and their URL is underneath that list there. If you can, when you leave this, you can click on that and get with Jamie and Frank at Eon directly for more deeper dives and questions and answers as well. I want to make sure everybody knows that. Any last questions or comments from the panel?
One thing I mentioned in my talk, and I'd love everybody on this call to go and try what I said earlier. And again, I'll show it in a minute when it's just our breakout. Go try on your own phone to do the kind of Google AR thing. You'll see some of the things that Jamie mentioned earlier. Obviously, it's not the same content, but it's the same idea of content in the room with you, which is really, really cool. And they've got all sorts of things like chemistry and so on and so forth. So I think a good takeaway and something you can just do easily is try that.
And Hugh, not to take away from either of any of those presentations just now, but while I think you were talking at the end, I actually did that. And
it's fun,
and
right?
It is quite amazing.
It's fun.
Just the resolution and the ability to run around and show anything in your room, and that icon or object to be moving around. It's very, very cool.
It gives people a quick idea of what's easy and not easy, but what's possible.
Yeah, it really does. It's very good, and it's right now, like you said, prime time.
Yep.
Anything else from Jim or Jamie before we end this portion of the webinar and move into the breakouts?
I think, Craig, I'd like to add one other comment, if you don't mind. This is Frank again. And, a lot of what we've been talking about today is content that's been pushed out to students to use for learning, obviously. And Jamie, maybe you can do a better job of talking about it, but part of our platform, you can actually do the flipped classroom where you offer parameters and a project and then have the students actually use our tools to come up with a solution. And Jamie, I don't know if you want to add more, if we might be running out of time, but that is another aspect that we didn't really dive too deeply into, but that's certainly another option where it really brings in students to, involvement and engagement in the learning process.
It's basically a process of using a design brief concept. I've used this with students in our VR Innovation Academies and actually even when I taught woodworking, give them a scenario, they solve the problem, and that first research of solving the problem is one learning, and then when they create an app inside of their platform to teach it, that reinforces it a second time, and then thirdly, when they present it to their colleagues in an on-class assignment or that lesson, that's the third reinforcement. So it's a very powerful way to engage the students because they're involved in the development, the sharing, the creation, and the revision part of it. So that's a good way to use the platform as well, to allow the students to do the development instead of you, the instructor. With guidance, of course.
My final thoughts are to use it, right? To try it. Eon, for example, you can download the app today and give you the opportunity to go in and build a couple practice lessons on there. We run into a lot of people that know a little bit and those that don't know much about it other than gaming or what they may have heard and seen. So I encourage everybody, under the whole idea here that prime time is here, we could tell you, we're doing this every day. We're seeing it. We're implementing it. And analogy would be once we started using a copy machine, a fax machine, we certainly didn't, not use it anymore. We forged ahead and we found use cases for it. So download those apps, engage with them, call us for some questions. We can go deeper and showing you some specific examples. I think that's another big part of it, Craig, is just, for the folks that are, they have an idea, but how do we implement this? This is an area where AVR Connect and our partners here can certainly help guide you down these paths.
Perfect way to cap off the time we spent together today. All right. I'm going to thank Jim and you and Jamie and Frank for your expertise and sharing with our NCATC member network and beyond. And again, we'll be uploading the full recording of today's AR/VR webinar in our website. I got that listed in our chat just now by Monday, the 23rd of November. And again, thanks to all the registered and attending folks. We really appreciate you as always. And please spread the word. And those of you might reach out to a couple that can look at the recorded version over the next couple of weeks or months. Everybody have a happy Thanksgiving and a safe everything else. And we'll look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar on other topics or expanded AR/VR. Again, thanks to our panelists and experts. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
So I think for anybody who's going to hang around, we're wide open. If you've got any further questions or anything you want to talk about, we can unmute.
Yep, I just unmuted myself as well. It's a very nice overview, Hugh.
Oh, thanks. Have you done this? The thing I was talking about, the panda thing and the dog thing.
Yeah.
I had it all teed up to screen share and show it. So I went and looked in preparation for this, and there are like dozens of other things now. When I first looked at it, there was like 12 animals. First of all, now there's like 40 animals, but there's also things, like I said, like the circulatory system and all sorts of both good and bad things. Not all of it I want to see in my room, to be honest.
No.
But a giant panda, I mean, how do you not love a giant panda?
the use cases of all the different use cases, right? They're not all tied to learning or education. And you've seen, Hugh, quite a bit on marketing. I've had the chance to experience firsthand some of these AR murals.
Yeah, some of them are really impressive. You're right.
They really are. You get groups of people where you see these murals come to life. And the same application, obviously can be translated into the workspace.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it gets people comfortable with it. So I can't help myself. So it's a panda.
Yeah.
Big old panda. That's pretty funny. You can walk up to him. But like me geeking out, I went and looked at a bunch of this stuff. That I look at metallic bond. Like, really? It tells you. Why can't I hit it?
I'm not sure with that. I'm not sure if I want to click on that one.
Yeah.
I had, I had a truck, a full-size semi, in AR dropped into, just like you're doing here, but it was dropped in my driveway.
That's cool.
And it was right. It looked like an RV. It was more industrial, had lots of different applications to it. I'm walking around and was able to see this in my driveway, walking with my tablet as my neighbors were wondering what I was doing, and they came over, and just an incredible experience. And that's why, for many who haven't seen this except in a video, you can get the idea. There's a great idea right here, is what you're saying. Student just placing this.
And the heart, what doesn't go down. So but the heart is beating. I can't walk up to it because I'm tethered right now, but you can sort of see the heart is beating. Like, it's cool. Anyway, so like I said, there's a whole bunch of these. I actually copied, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's Jimmy. Not gonna help anybody. Anyway, I think I even more. So like the lymphatic system, because I was dying to see that in my home, my room. One sec. So we'll just get back to, anyway. For some reason, the what's it called? The planets didn't work. I kind of like that idea. Maybe it will. Yeah, so I think some of this works better on an Android. Not all of it, I think, works on iOS, and I'm on iOS. Well,
we'll have a few hanger-on here's in the room. Is there anybody that was maybe has some specific questions? I'm going to
fade into a bed somewhere. So Jim is kicking illness.
Yes.
All right. So I think if we don't have any questions or don't have anything people want to chat about, why don't we close it down and let everybody have a great week?
Yep. If I'm gonna quickly put my email in here as well.
Yeah.
Anyone feel free to contact me directly.
Mine as well, just in the chat. If anybody would like to.
Okay, Hugh.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Appreciate it. Goodbye.
All right. Get well, Jim.